Quite some time ago, a good friend of mine who some of you know, Max Power, and we decided to collaborate and make a video on how tires work, with the inclusion of best recommended tire and also offering understanding on how to navigate through the elements in SnowRunner. Still, the most frequent question I get on stream, in my YouTube comments, or even online in any type of post, still is, what are the best tires to use? While I believe all of this information is really found in this video right here, I do see a lot of folks online get hung up on tire friction values, and perhaps not quite fully understanding all the info presented in that video. While we did not provide numbers on the video, I'm going to try to informally break down what I mean by those values and those questions regarding this issue. However, the mud running tips video, in my humble opinion, is a one-stop shop for examples on how this works. While I would never downplay the value of friction coefficients, they don't actually cover everything on how tires interact with the surface. Yes, ratings do matter very much so, but so does wheel width, wheel stiffness, vehicle weight, and vehicle collision model or ground clearance. So I'm going to quickly go through a video made by the Human Highlighter. This is a really good video on how tires interact with surfaces, and he actually does a lot of testing here in some very deep conditions, but I'm also going to cover a little bit on shallow conditions and what tires do well in shallow conditions. But if you really want to see examples on these in entirety, please go check out my mud running tips video. It will really open your eyes to how good other tires are that you have not seen before. So anyways, let's jump in here, talk about this video. This is from the Human Highlighter. He's essentially going to break down a test here, and we'll get into that. But right now I want to show you, this is actually what he found on Reddit from someone who broke down from their interpretation of code. I cannot confirm or deny that this is actually accurate information that's from developer made or anything like that. But essentially, I can tell you this, that the width of the tire essentially matters. The softness, the force that's pushing down on the surface does matter a lot. And even in places where there is thick mud, there is dirt mixed in, which is why an OHS2 tire is actually rather good. So in this small example, why tires do well with good dirt ratings is because they actually penetrate, and theoretically, if this is true, they hit this dirt down here, and then they're allowed to push themselves through. If and only if the vehicle weight allows them to push through, there's enough downward force from vehicle weight, and also the vehicle collision model does not get hung up in this yellow area here. However, I have another theory that there is mud and dirt mixed in, and these are kind of like all in here. That's kind of why I believe that there is still mud rating and dirt rating mixed in with the whole terrain mesh, I guess I would call it. Now, anyways, I'm going to talk quickly about the narrow tires and stuff like that. So here is the infamous tire rating chart that can be found on MapRunner, so you can go check that out for your convenience. However, I want to talk about some tires that are pretty much in the single narrow class. When I mean single narrow is the width. So when I say single wide, basically they're just a wider set tire. What I mean by that, here's a fine example of that. The MHS1 is actually, I call it a single narrow, because the width is actually just 0.65, and then the wide tires start at MHS2. Now, something I do want to highlight here is for any of the people who are using the DMHS 2, 3, the 1, 2, and 3, these tires here are coded the exact same here as well. And they are the exact same wheel weights as well. So there's no difference between the MHS1, the DMHS1, 2, and 3. They all are the same tire despite looking different. Now, some of you guys will hear me on stream talking about, why would I use an off-road tire over a mud tire? And something I told you in the mud running tips video is, I believe the OHS2 is pretty much the best tire for a vehicle that cannot have an MHS2 value and or an OHD. And we'll talk about OHDs, MHS2s, 3s, and also these balloon tires down here, which these two are actually definitely different in some regard. Now, yes, this is still a single narrow tire, And as you can see, compared to the MHS1, it has less mud rating. So folks would arguably say that, well, it has a better mud rating, it's going to do better in mud. However, my theory is there's dirt and mud mixed into every surface you drive in. However, I believe vehicle collision models, where it's set, and also your vehicle's weight, do a lot with this. OHS2s can actually penetrate surface enough to hit some type of dirt value in there, allowing them to actually have better movement in mud than MHS1s. Now, here's the thing. In dirt, MHS1 and the DMHS are really good in shallow conditions, okay? Because they are shallow conditions. Now, if you sink too much to your frame in deep areas, you're going to see tires like the MHS2 and also OHDs shine, and then you're also going to see tires that can just straight up get on top of surfaces like the AMHS1 and the TMHS, which these are basically just balloon tires, very wide width on front and back wheels. So in my opinion, the OHS2 is the call here, based upon if this is true. Even if this wasn't true, I'm going to say those are better. I've tested them. They are on my mud running tips video. Please go check them out. You will see some really good performance from those. Some vehicles that have options like this are the Azov brothers. They don't necessarily get an MHS2. They only get an MHS1 value, and then they get DMHS tires, which essentially are all coded the same. They follow the same template. So therefore, I would rather choose the single narrow tire, which is the OHS2, to get more dirt rating, because that dirt rating can actually get you more traction. If this model is true in entirety. If not, I believe it still does better through my own testing. Okay, so the human highlighter goes through his preface here, and he talks about off-road tires versus mud tires. And he's basically going to test with the Tega 6436 of Warren Grad, 6455B, and the ANK. Okay, so here's the route that he's going to use. This is on Black Badger Lake in Wisconsin. He's essentially going to send 3 or 4 big off-road trucks, pretty much the S-tier trucks, through this map right here. And as you know, this is very thick going through here, and down here, this is essentially a whole bog. So he's going to use really heavy, wide mud tires to go through this. And he's going to time them and see which one's the best. First up is the Voron Grad. Doesn't have its top engine. Still, this is a very good engine. I think it's at 210,000 torque, I believe. Same one as the Azov 64131 and 5319. So it's still a good gearbox. Off-road gearbox, or still a good engine, sorry. Off-road gearbox, which is also pretty much needed for this because he's going to be traversing really slow. And it says he does have MHS2 tires for this trial up here. Down below, OHD ones. And I'm not actually going to go through this. I'm going to skip to where the time comes through. And as you can see, the OHD1 tires without any weight on the vehicle, just with the vehicle's weight alone, is only beating the MHS2 by 1 second. Now these are in thicker conditions, okay? Keep that in mind. Now let's move on to the Tega 6436. 6436 has the infamous TMHS tire, which you pretty much can see a lot of people use, versus the OHD1. The big thing about the OHD1 versus the TMHS tire is the OHD1 tire is actually a lot wider than the TMHS tire. I wouldn't say a lot, but it is wider. A lot is I would say not a really good term to use, but they are wider than the TMHS tire. However, the front tire here is actually only half as wide as the rear tires, I believe. So they're actually like 0.52 or 0.53 or 0.56 or something like that. So they're actually really narrow. So this can actually get you in trouble because your front tires could sink. You could catch your vehicle collision model and then drag your frame in the front, stopping your forward movement because you accumulate resistance, right? The TMHS tire is infamous for just getting on top of mud surfaces that are really thick like this watery, swampy mud. And as you can see, these are still a very wide tire, and they're allowed to get on top of the surface using just low gear, because if you put low high, you're going to get too much spin value because the TMHS tires don't really have a lot of bite to them. They have more bite than the AMHS tire because of the stiffness. The stiffness, if you think about stiffness and width, if a tire has low stiffness, the tire kind of spreads out on the surface. If the tire is stiff, it basically just allows more pounds per square inch to that area. That's kind of how I think about it logically in my head. So something you want to notice is here, a lot of folks will say that the OHD is actually better if you drive in reverse because you won't actually put your front end into the surface, but no one's really going to do that in real world unless you really want to just take a truck into pieces of cargo and then just drive backwards. Not really going to do that. Another factor you need to think about here is also your lateral stability. You're gaining a lot of lateral stability from these wide TMHS tires the whole way through the truck. Longitudinally, they're equal. However, longitudinally, your balance is not equal with an OHD1 because your front tires, however, are a lot more, these are basically single narrow. They're actually single very narrow. They're like a 0.56 or a 0.52 or 3. I forget the actual value, but they are very narrow. But your back wheels are wider than the TMHS tires. So you're still going to gain a ton of stability by using the OHD tires. However, you could get the tricycle effect if you're using the high range gearbox, speeding down roads and just making hard turns. You might go up on your two tires. I call it the tricycle effect. I have seen it happen. Recovering is just basically steering out of it, but that's just to note, if you're just a slow pace player, that's kind of non-factor. So let's just keep that in mind. Now for the results, as you can see, TMHS tires are still 1 second behind the OHD ones. And then we scroll on to the Tega 6455B. The 6455B, actually, this test is not with the OHD tire because it actually doesn't have an OHD option. So the 6455B it only has an OHS2 option. And if, in my opinion, I would probably use a TMHS tire over an OHS tire just because, well, you get in a sticky situation, you need to kind of float like this, you just can. And I think the Tega with the TMHS tire being a little bit more stiffer than the AMHS tire, and also the Tega 6455B being a little bit heavier than the 6436, I think you gain a little bit of traction with those things in consideration. However, during this test, as you can see, the TMHS tires actually lose to the MHS2s by 5 seconds. Now, before I go on, he's going to show more tests, and these are really good tests to show. These are in really thick conditions with big, wide tires, okay? Now, one thing you need to consider is this. Yes, the TMHS tire just got beat by an MHS2. And also the TMHS tire got beat by the OHDs by 1 second. Now this is without cargo weight, so that kind of changes things here, as we'll see. However, you need to think about this. In the grand scheme of a game that takes thousands of hours to beat, 1,000 hours pretty much up to season 11, give or take, couple hundred hours here and there based upon your driver's skill, knowledge, etc. 1 second from a drop-off to pickup location in the grand scheme of 1,000-hour gameplay really isn't that much. So when it boils down to it, essentially you could just use what you want to use. Personally, I'm probably going to use an OHD1 for the sheer fact that I can just load up its axles and have that good dirt rating. Okay, so he basically says there's just not much difference here. And as we continue, he shows with one metal beam. And as you can see, the 6436 with the TMHS actually lagged behind the OHD ones. And I believe the reason for this is because when you add weight to the OHD in the back, you're taking a lot of your weight off of your front wheels. And weight with really good tire codes like an OHD1, and they're heavy and they're wide, allows you to dig in really well. Same thing here with the Voron Grad. As you can see, the OHD won by 2 seconds, and then down here for the 6455B, the TMHS lagged behind a lot here. And then the MHS2 was 332. Okay, so he did the ANK as well. I'm not really necessarily going to go into a lot of the ANK. I wanted to show those things. And then he did a 2 metal beam test. Okay, so this is kind of where it gets a little bit interesting as well. So the 2 metal beam test, I don't know how he delivered these 2 metal beams. I believe it was via a hitch trailer. So if that's the case, if he's delivering these via hitch trailer, yes, I'm pretty sure that you're going to take a long time to claw your way through this. And as you can still see, the TMHS are still getting through this. However, for some reason, Tiga 6436 with the OHDs is still just handling these metal beams. So just kind of shows you. So in conclusion, basically he says that mud tires are slightly slower in the terrain. And, basically even with bottoming out, you can still barely move. So in conclusion, based upon the data we just were shown with wide off-road tires compared to wide mud tires, as you saw, there is only a few seconds that you're going to save by using a different set of tires. Now, like I mentioned in the video a little bit earlier, in the grand scheme of a 1,000-hour game, give or take hours here and there, it's really not that big of a difference. I think something I would debate on making it to a drop-off location faster versus stability. I think with a wide set tire that is longitudinally wide, like uniformly wide, kind of like a TMHS tire, you're gaining vehicle balance all the way through the vehicle. With an OHD tire, you have that narrow front tire, which yes, you can get the tricycle effect as we did mention, but however, if you want my true opinion on what tires I will personally use, is essentially this. For trucks that cannot use anything else, can't use an MHS2 value tire or even an OHD, I'm going to use the OHS2 for the reasons I explained. These tires are all the same. I'd rather be able to pierce through that condition to the bottom of the dirt layer or the bottom of the mud layer to hit the dirt layer, and or even if the dirt layer is mixed in with the mud layer, I'm capturing that with a friction coefficient of 3.0, allowing me to just speed through this. And also I know that this truck has good collision model. That's just something to do your homework on. Now, for trucks that normally, the American trucks that don't have options for those, the best tire set that you can use, in my opinion, is going to be the UOD2s. They are very stiff. They have a 3.0 dirt rating, and also they are pretty wide. They're not wider than the OHD, of course, but they are pretty wide. So therefore, they are going to be a very good tire in muddy conditions. So don't sleep on the UOD2s. They're not really that bad. Other than that, pretty much it's going to be the OHD option. If I can use an OHD, you can pretty much see me on stream using the OHD, unless I just want to float with a TMHS tire and AMHS. I'm going to use an OHD. So that's essentially what you'll see pretty much all the time, because I want to load up my back axles, especially with powerful trucks, load up my back axles, allow these to dig into the ground, basically take some weight off my front end, and yeah, let the tires do the work. So essentially, guys, that is it for this video. Please like and subscribe. And also, please go check out the mud running tips video. It's going to show you examples of different tires you should use, how they do in mud, how to get out of mud with each individual set of tires that are generally on the smaller trucks. The other trucks that have the very large, super heavy tires, don't really need to worry about them. That's a whole different video. So hope you guys have a wonderful day as always, and God bless, stay upright. We'll see you later.